There is a map we all know. We learned it in school. It's a map of lines drawn by kings and generals. A map of flags planted on foreign soil. On this map, colonization was a physical act. It arrived on wooden ships, with cannons and soldiers. It announced itself loudly. It took your land, replaced your flag, and told you that you were now part of an empire. The process was brutal, and it was honest about its own ambition. It wanted your resources, your labor, and your obedience. And it wasn't afraid to say so. That map and that style of power feels like ancient history. We tell ourselves we live in a different world now, a world of independent nations, over 190 countries, each with a seat at the table, a flag, a national anthem, a world where sovereignty is sacred, but power did not disappear. It just learned to become quiet. It learned to stop announcing itself. It realized you don't need to plant a flag if you can write the rules. You don't need an army if you can control the debt. And you don't need to conquer a country if you can get its leaders to hand you the keys willingly, with a smile and a handshake for the cameras. This is the story of that new map. A map that isn't drawn on paper but on balance sheets, in contract law, and inside the minds of people who believe they are free. It's a playbook on how to own the world without anyone realizing it's being sold. This is how you colonize a country in the 21st century. The first rule of this new game is simple. Make the chains invisible. Make them look like help. Imagine a country blessed with a curse. It has rich soil, deep reserves of oil, or veins of minerals essential for the next generation of technology. But it lacks something else. It might be roads, a stable power grid, or a deep water port to ship its goods. It has wealth in the ground, but no way to get it out and sell it to the world. It is a prisoner of its own poverty. Along comes a friend, a wealthy nation, or a global financial institution. The friend says, "We see your potential. We want to help you build. We will give you a loan, a massive one, enough to build that port, those highways, that power plant, enough to build your future." It feels like a gift, a partnership. The leaders of the developing nation see a path to progress. They see jobs for their people and a chance to stand on their own 2 feet. The deal is signed. The money flows in. Concrete is poured, steel rises from the ground, and for a while, everything looks like hope. This is the first and most important step in the playbook. The offer you can't refuse. It's not an invasion, it's an investment. But a loan is not a gift, it is a tool. And its true purpose is not always what it seems. A loan always comes with terms, with interest, with a payment schedule, and this is where the quiet conquest begins. Because the loan was designed from the very beginning with the understanding that it might be too big to repay. The goal isn't just to get your money back. The goal is the leverage you gain when someone owes you. When an individual gets into debt, they might lose their house. When a country gets into debt, it can lose a lot more. It can lose the very things that define it as a sovereign nation. The old colonizer came with a gun and took your land. The new colonizer comes with a calculator and asks you to sign for a loan you can never repay. The end result is strangely similar. One is called conquest, the other is called foreign aid or development assistance. The language has changed, but the fundamental transfer of power has not. It has just become more polite. Let's make this real. Let's talk about a port. In Sri Lanka, the government had a bold vision for its southern coast, the Hambantota port. It was meant to be a bustling hub for global trade, perfectly positioned along one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. But a project of this scale costs billions. So Sri Lanka turned to a friend for the money: China. The loans were provided. The port was built. It was a modern marvel of engineering. But there was a problem. The port wasn't attracting enough ships. The revenue that was supposed to pay back the enormous debt never arrived. The bill came due and Sri Lanka couldn't pay. What happens next is the critical part of the playbook. In the old days, a failure to pay a debt to a foreign power might have meant gunboats appearing on the horizon. But that's messy. It's bad public relations. The modern approach is much cleaner. There are no soldiers, only lawyers and accountants. The lender says, "You cannot pay us in cash, so you will pay us in assets. You will pay us with the port itself." In 2017, Sri Lanka formally handed over the Hambantota port and 15,000 acres of land around it to a Chinese state-owned company. The price was not a sale, it was a lease. The term of the lease is 99 years. Think about that for a moment. 99 years. Generations of Sri Lankans will be born, live their lives, and die while a strategic piece of their homeland is controlled by a foreign power. No shots were fired. No war was declared. It was all done through a contract, a quiet transaction in a boardroom. It was a foreclosure on a national scale. This is what some observers call debt trap diplomacy. It's a slow, patient strategy. You offer a huge loan for a big infrastructure project. If the project succeeds and the country pays you back with interest, you've made a great return on your money. But if it fails and the country defaults, you get something even more valuable. You get a strategic asset, a port, an airport, a railway, a foothold. And this strategy is not unique to one country. Other institutions have been using a similar playbook for decades. Think of the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF and the World Bank. They also provide loans to countries in crisis. But these loans come with strings attached, a set of conditions called structural adjustment programs. That sounds technical and boring, but what it means is simple. The lender gives the country a new rulebook. This rulebook often says the government must cut spending on things like healthcare and education. It says the country must open its markets to foreign competition. And most importantly, it often demands that the nation sell off its public assets, the water company, the power grid, the telecommunications network. This is called privatization. So, to get the emergency loan to stay afloat, a government is forced to sell pieces of itself. And who has the money to buy these valuable assets? Often it's large multinational corporations from the very countries that have the most influence over the IMF and World Bank. The result is the same. The country's control over its own economy, its own essential services, slowly slips away. It becomes managed from the outside. Its sovereignty is hollowed out. One loan, one condition, one privatization at a time. It still has a flag, but the flag flies over a house that is owned by the bank. The loan is the foot in the door. The next step is to take ownership of what's inside the house. The real prize isn't the port or the railroad, it's what the port and railroad are used for. They are built to carry a country's wealth away. This brings us to the second major tool in the playbook, the Resource Exploitation Agreement. This isn't about a loan, it's about a contract. It starts with a foreign corporation, an oil giant, a mining conglomerate, a massive agribusiness firm, approaching the government of a resource-rich, cash-poor nation. They come with a proposal that sounds like another form of partnership. You have cobalt in your mountains, they say, or rare earth minerals, or vast forests, or fertile land. You don't have the technology or the capital to develop it. Let us do it for you. We will invest billions. We will create jobs. We will pay you a fee, a royalty for everything we extract. You will get a share of the profits. All you have to do is sign this agreement giving us the exclusive right to operate here. To a government struggling to balance its budget or provide basic services, this offer is incredibly tempting. It promises immediate cash and a stream of future income, all without taking on more debt. It seems like a win-win. So, the deal is signed. The corporation gets its rights. But the devil is in the fine print. The fine print of these contracts can lock a country in for decades. These are not 5 or 10-year deals. They are often for 30, 50, or even 99 years. Again, think about that timescale. A 99-year contract signed today will not expire until the year 2124. No one who signed the deal will be alive to see it end. The government that approved it will be a distant memory. The entire world will have changed, but the contract will remain. Consider the Democratic Republic of Congo. The DRC holds more than a half of the world's cobalt, a mineral essential for the batteries in our smartphones and electric cars. For decades, foreign firms have signed deals that give them immense control over these resources. The country itself remains one of the poorest in the world, plagued by conflict and instability, while trillions of dollars of mineral wealth flow out of its borders. The people who live on top of the cobalt see very little of its benefit. The money goes elsewhere. Or look to the Amazon rainforest. Vast tracts of forest are not cut down by local farmers with axes. They are cleared on an industrial scale by multinational agribusiness firms, often with the legal blessing of governments who have signed away land rights in exchange for investment. The world gets cheap soy and beef. The country gets a one-time payment and a permanent scar on its landscape. These resource agreements are a modern form of tribute. In the old empires, a conquered king had to send a yearly payment of gold or grain to the imperial capital. Today, the tribute flows automatically, legally, through the clauses of a contract. The country hasn't been conquered, it has been incorporated. Its natural wealth has been reclassified as a corporate asset on a global ledger. And this is done with the full cooperation of the country's own leaders, who are often rewarded handsomely for their signature. The playbook is effective because it finds a way to make the transfer of wealth look like a business deal, not a surrender. Once you have a 99-year lease on a port and a 50-year contract for a mine, you have a problem. You have long-term investments in a place you do not politically control. What if a new government comes to power? What if the people protest? What if a future leader decides the deal their predecessor signed was a bad one and tries to cancel it? You need to protect your investment. The playbook has two primary tools for this. One is hard power and one is soft power. One is the guard and the other is the gate. The guard is the military base. For decades, the presence of foreign troops on a country's soil was the clearest sign of occupation. Today, it's called an alliance, a training partnership, or a joint security initiative. The justification is almost always the same: fighting terrorism, stopping drug trafficking, or ensuring regional stability. Wealthy nations establish military bases or deploy advisors in countries where they have significant economic interests. The United States, for instance, has a network of bases and outposts across Africa, a continent with vast reserves of oil, gas, and minerals. These bases are rarely spoken of as tools for economic leverage. They are framed as benevolent efforts to help local governments fight extremist groups. But the presence of a foreign military base does more than just fight terrorism. It sends a constant, quiet message to the host government. It says, "We are here. We are watching. Our interests are protected." It provides intelligence. It builds relationships with the local military. It becomes a permanent part of the country's power structure. A leader who considers nationalizing a foreign-owned mine or canceling a port lease has to think about the reaction of their powerful ally. They have to wonder if their own military, trained and equipped by that foreign power, would side with them or with their patrons. The base functions as a silent check on any government that might stray too far from the accepted rules. It is an insurance policy, written in steel, but a military guard can only do so much. A far more effective way to secure your investment is to own the gates. This means controlling the essential services the population depends on. This is the privatization chapter of the playbook. As we saw with the IMF's structural adjustment programs, a condition for a loan is often the sale of public utilities. Let's go back to Bolivia in the late 1990s. The government, under pressure from the World Bank to secure new loans, was forced to privatize the water system of its third largest city, Cochabamba. The contract was sold to a consortium of international corporations. Almost immediately, the new private owners did what any for-profit business would do. They raised the price to maximize their return. Water bills for ordinary families shot up. in some cases eating up a quarter of their monthly income. The company even claimed ownership of the rain itself, making it illegal for people to collect rainwater from their own roofs without a permit. This wasn't about security in the military sense. This was about something much deeper. When you control a person's water, you control their life. The people of Cochabamba rose up in what became known as the Water Wars. After massive protests and a government crackdown, the contract was finally canceled. The Bolivia story is a rare case of successful resistance. In many other places, the privatization deals stick. Foreign firms end up owning the power grid, the telecommunications network, the sanitation systems. This is the ultimate form of control. You don't just own a mine on the edge of the country. You own the electricity that flows into every home. You own the water that comes out of every tap. You are no longer just an investor. You are woven into the very fabric of daily life. The population becomes your customer base. And the government that allowed this to happen finds itself powerless to reverse it. It has sold the gates to its own kingdom. You can have the debt, the contracts, the military bases, and own the water supply. But these forms of control are still external. They can still breed resentment. People know when their water bill has doubled. They can see the foreign soldiers in their cities. To make the system truly stable and permanent, you need one final piece. You have to go deeper. You have to colonize the mind. The most effective form of control is the one that is never questioned because it feels normal. It's the one that is adopted willingly by the local population, especially its leaders and educated classes. The goal is to make them see the world and their own country's place in it through the eyes of the colonizer. This isn't done with propaganda posters and loudspeakers on the street. It's done through much softer, more sophisticated channels. It starts with education. The most promising young students from developing nations are offered scholarships to study at elite universities in the West. There, they learn modern economics, political science, and law. They are taught that the path to success for their countries is through deregulation, free trade, and attracting foreign investment. The very pillars of the Playbook. They are taught to admire this model. They return home, brilliant, credentialed, and speaking the language of global finance. They become the new leaders, the finance ministers, the central bankers, the top advisors. They genuinely believe the path they were taught is the only path. They implement the policies not because they are forced to by an outside power, but because they believe it is the right thing to do. They willingly sign the loan agreements and the resource contracts because their prestigious education told them this is how progress works. The second channel is media and culture. The movies we watch, the music we listen to, the news we consume, they all carry subtle messages about what a successful life and a successful society look like. Western media, with its immense global reach, often presents a world where consumerism is the ultimate goal, where individual success is paramount, and where the solutions to problems are found in technology and the market, not in collective action or tradition. This creates a cultural pull. Local elites begin to emulate these values. The dream becomes a shopping mall in the capital city that looks just like one in Houston or Paris, even if the countryside lacks clean water. Development gets defined as the ability to consume like the West. This psychological shift makes the extraction of raw materials from the ground seem like a small price to pay for a new, modern identity. Finally, there are the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations. Many do fantastic life-saving work, but some, particularly those funded heavily by foreign governments or massive corporations, can serve another purpose. They can shape a country's internal politics. An NGO focused on good governance might push for legal reforms that make it easier for foreign corporations to operate. An environmental NGO might campaign to turn a mineral-rich area into a national park, preventing local development, but leaving the door open for a single, well-connected, eco-friendly corporation to manage it later. They become a powerful lobby inside the country, pushing for policies that align with the interests of their foreign funders, all under the admirable banner of charity or progress. When you put these pieces together, the foreign educated elite, the pervasive media, and the influential NGOs, you create an ecosystem of consent. The population, or at least its most influential members, internalizes the new colonial logic. They become the managers of their own colonization. They don't see the chains. They see it as growth, as modernization, as the only way forward. It's a system that is no longer imposed by force, but one that is sustained by belief. So, what does the finished product look like? What is the end state of this quiet, modern colonization? It looks on the surface like a perfectly normal country. The flag still flies high over the presidential palace. Elections are held. There is a parliament, a constitution, and representatives who make speeches about the national interest. To the outside world and to most of its own citizens, the country is sovereign. It is independent. It is free. But this is an illusion. It is a stage of power. The actors on the stage, the presidents and ministers, have the titles, but they have lost the script. The real decisions are being made in rooms they will never enter. The country's national budget isn't truly decided by its elected officials. It is shaped by the conditions of its last loan from the IMF. It is influenced by the need to maintain a good credit rating from agencies in New York and London. A bad rating could make its debt unsustainable overnight. Its trade policy isn't designed for the benefit of its own farmers and workers. It is dictated by the terms of a free trade agreement it was pressured to sign. Its most valuable resources, its oil, its minerals, its land, are locked in 99-year contracts, their profits flowing to shareholders thousands of miles away. Its essential services like water and electricity are owned by foreign corporations. Its own military is deeply intertwined with a foreign superpower, creating a silent check on its political choices. And its elite class, educated in foreign universities and consuming foreign media, sees this entire arrangement as natural and necessary. This is the perfection of the system, a form of control so complete that it doesn't require force. A colony that doesn't know it's a colony. The people vote, but their votes can't change the contracts that were signed 30 years ago. They can elect a new leader, but that leader inherits a system where the real power lies with distant banks and boardrooms. The nation is free in name, but managed in practice. Its sovereignty has become a performance. But what happens if someone tries to break the spell? What happens if a new leader gets elected who sees the game for what it is? A leader who says, "No more. We will cancel the unfair debts. We will renegotiate the mining contracts. We will use our country's wealth for our own people." This is the moment the system reveals its final and most dangerous tool. When the quiet methods fail, the playbook calls for one last action. You must destroy the reputation of the one who resists. The resisting leader is not described as a patriot. They are not framed as someone standing up for their people. Instantly, the language in the global media begins to shift. New words are attached to their name. Words like dictator, authoritarian, threat to stability, anti-democratic. News reports emerge detailing their corruption, real or invented. Experts appear on television to explain how this leader is a danger to the world. The story is no longer about a country trying to reclaim its resources. The story becomes about a rogue state and its brutal regime. Think of the narratives built around certain nations that have defied the playbook. When Libya's Muammar Gaddafi attempted to create a gold-backed African currency to challenge the dominance of the dollar, he was increasingly portrayed as a dangerous tyrant, leading to a NATO-backed intervention that left the country in ruins and its oil fields open for business. When Iran seeks to control its own oil industry, outside the Western financial system, its government is consistently framed as an illegitimate, fanatical threat, justifying crippling economic sanctions that hurt ordinary people. In Venezuela, a country with the world's largest oil reserves, any attempt at creating a socialist state independent of U.S. influence is met with the narrative of a failed dictatorship, justifying sanctions and support for opposition movements. The goal of this narrative weaponization is to isolate the resisting country. It makes them a pariah, It justifies sanctions that cripple their economy, making life for their citizens unbearable, and turning the people against the very leader who tried to fight for them. And if sanctions don't work, this narrative provides the perfect moral justification for more direct action, whether it's a covertly funded coup or, in the most extreme cases, outright military intervention. The message is clear to every other leader in the world. This is what happens when you step out of line. This is what happens when you challenge the playbook. It is far safer and far more profitable for you personally to cooperate. This is the invisible empire. It has no single king or capital. Its power is distributed across a network of financial institutions, multinational corporations, and the governments that protect them. It operates not through conquest, but through consent. A consent manufactured by debt, by contracts, by media, and by the education of a willing elite. Recognizing this playbook is not about falling into despair. It is not about assigning blame to one country or another, because it is a system that many powerful players participate in. It's about seeing the world with clearer eyes. It is about understanding that the map of power today is not about which flag flies over a building. It's about who owns the mortgage on that building. It's about who wrote the contract for the minerals underneath it. And it's about who gets to tell the story when someone inside tries to light it on fire, just to feel warm and free for a single day. The first step to changing the rules of a game is to first understand how it is played.